All right, let's do this. Hello, everyone. Thank you all for joining. It's time for another exciting lightning talk. I'm Parag Katkar, your host for tonight. I'm the head of consulting practices at InRhythm. InRhythm is a modern product and technology consulting firm, and our practice area consultants, they stay on top of the latest technology trends, and every Thursday at 5:15 p.m. Eastern Time, one of them shares their knowledge on these exciting trends with you. And this week, Mike DePhillips, who is a senior Android engineer with us and a KMM expert, is going to give us an overview of Compose Multiplatform, which is based on Kotlin and Jetpack Compose. And it's a declarative framework for sharing UIs across multiple platforms. That helps you save a lot of time and money. And it's an exciting technology that's gathering a lot of traction. And I'm excited to learn more about it. So without further ado, let's get it started, Mike.
Thanks, Parag. Hi, everyone. So today, lightning talk, like Parag mentioned, is on Compose Multiplatform. We're going to look to the possible future of UI development. A little bit more about me, like Parag mentioned, senior Android dev for KMM. Been doing Android and iOS programming for about 14 years. Always have done both. I'm relatively new to Compose and KMM, which are both relatively new technologies. So here is just some terms. Parag mentioned them briefly, but Jetpack Compose is a declarative UI framework by Google. It's written all in Kotlin. And Kotlin Multiplatform, it used to be called KMM, so Kotlin Multiplatform Mobile, but they've been branding as KMP now, just because now it's on desktop and web. Is an SDK developed by JetBrains that allows devs to use Kotlin and compile it to be used in apps across many platforms. So a little bit more about KMP, because that is sort of like what Compose Multiplatform is written on. So KMP is used by some big companies like Netflix, Philips, Cash App, and here at InRhythm. It allows you to share business logic, data models, database network layer, write all that code once, debug it once, and distribute it as libraries to the native apps. So this presentation will explore, we have that layer that's used, that's in a stable release. And now can we take it even further and share the UI layer by writing that once in Compose? So why use Compose Multiplatform? The first reason is kind of the same reason you would use any cross-platform technologies to save time and money. With Compose Multiplatform, you can write your UI layer once, share your branding, images, style, shapes, and even animations, which can be time-consuming. And there's a lot of cross-platform technologies. I'm sure you've heard of like React Native, Cordova, possibly Flutter, which is also a Google product. And all of them are pretty great. I used to run a small consulting company that made apps as well. And like every time we would do estimates, people would usually ping us and be like, can we do this cross-platform to save money? And I would look into it. And sometimes it was an option, but a lot of the times I had to write the whole app in that platform or up for like React Native. So Compose Multiplatform allows you to only write parts of your code in Compose Multiplatform and the rest in native. So that would be the interoperability, and you can integrate this into existing apps so you can gradually adopt it, which I think is really powerful and what sets it apart from other cross-platform solutions. Another huge thing here is like you can reuse all your Android code pretty much. I mean, that's not a blanket statement. There are differences, things you need to consider, which I'll get into more. But I was able to copy and paste like some of the InRhythm devs Android code from a previous summit straight into Compose Multiplatform, and it just ran on the iPhone. So having that source of all these views that people have already written is pretty special. And there's another one going back to, clients want cross-platform solutions. Like it's hard to make estimates because like if I'm trying to estimate a Flutter app, like I don't know Flutter. I need to first find a Flutter dev to even tell me how long this will take, like what the edge case native features are that could cause problems. And this is pretty amazing because you don't really need a specialized developer. You can just usually grab an Android developer to do this work. You still definitely need an iOS team lead or like an iOS dev for the integration parts. But it really does allow you to like have a more flexible like dev resource scaling model, which I think is also another thing that really sets it apart. So here's the state of release. So they just released alpha for iOS, and that's what I'm mainly going to be focusing on today. Android stable, desktop is stable. I messed around with desktop a little bit. It was awesome on my Mac. I did not get to play around with web, which is in experimental phase right now. Web is just not my area of expertise. I'd love if someone else did the next lightning talk on Compose Multiplatform for web, because I think it would be amazing to be able to push this app also to a web platform, web technologies as well. So let's focus on Compose for iOS. It uses, this is kind of technical, but it uses Kotlin native to compile into native iOS code. It uses this open source C++ library called Skia Graphics to draw on a UI view controller canvas. So a UI view controller is like a screen on an iPhone. It currently supports most of like the Jetpack Compose functions that if you're an Android dev, you're used to using, like the ones listed. And gradual adoption is enabled, so you can do a whole app, a screen, or just part of a screen. I even saw an example where they had the iOS native title bar, then they had a Compose view, and then they had like the native iOS tab bar at the bottom, and it was like switching composables, which I thought was really cool because that makes it much easier to integrate into existing apps. Yeah, so what I set out to do to prove this technology was the InRhythm team in the last Q2 summit did a workshop on KMP or KMM. And they wrote some UI code that like pulled some data from the network layer, deserialized it, pushed into a data model, and then showed that on iOS and Android separately. Like iOS was Swift UI code, Android was Compose code. So I wanted to see if I could just take that Compose code and just get rid of the Swift UI code to make it cross-platform. So this code is up online. Please reach out after if you want to take a look at it. So my approach was I wanted to like just integrate it into the KMM project, but I ended up having trouble, and I used the Compose Multiplatform template app from JetBrains. And first I started with transferring over the Kotlin API model code, which was written in KMM already. Then I transferred the theming and then the composables. And then I tried to transfer the navigation and it didn't work, and I'll get more into that later. So here was sort of the end result. This is the app on Android. So there's a loading screen here. So there's the search or loading progress. Then there's a list here on iOS. If you're used to Swift UI, it's called a lazy VStack, but on Android, it's called a lazy column. And so it's a list of cards. Some cool stuff going on here is if you can see on the second card, there's like an alpha, 20% alpha image. That image loaded from the internet, so async image loading. Also, all of this data you're seeing also loaded from the internet. So all of that's cross-platform. And let me go back a little bit. So you click on a card, it goes to a new screen. Shout out to Satish, who's one of the original developers for the summit. And so there's some navigation there with the back button. And this was really cool too. If you click on it, there's automatic support for like deep linking to the web or pushing to a web view. I didn't really have to do anything, it just worked. So that was on Android. And here's the same code on iOS. So as you can see, it loads up, it's scrollable, the images load. You see like when you click a card, you can see like sort of this what they call on Android or in Compose a ripple animation. So it's like a circle going out from the middle, which is really cool to see. The scrolling behavior is a little odd. So if you see here, like as I'm scrolling, when I click, it like does the click animation, even if you don't finish clicking. Like, so I think it's like a difference in focus states between iOS and Android. So minor differences there. And I did run this, I'll talk about this later, but I did run this in dark mode as well. Yeah, and like the web, this used Safari instead of Chrome to load up on the iPhone. So really excited, like really excited about it. I'm gonna move forward here. Before I give the tour of the code, I'll go over some issues that I ran into myself. There wasn't that many sample projects, so I mean that's pretty common with most leading edge tech, right? Like before a lot of developers have adapted to it. There's not going to be much to reference. Occasionally iOS animation skipped frames. This is like a known issue with the alpha release, and they should be fixed in the beta. There wasn't any out-of-the-box solution for string localizations. So there's third-party support, but it was kind of frustrating. Like anytime I transferred a composable, I would have to like swap out the strings. Compose navigation is still Android only. So there was quite a bit of navigation code in the code base that the team did for the summit, and I wasn't able to use that. I sort of had to roll my own. But there are really great third-party libraries for navigation in Compose, and Voyager is one of them. Another limitation, but while dark mode is supported, which is really awesome, other accessibility features on the iPhone were limited. Like the font didn't increase when I increased the font size and accessibility, and the iOS voiceover didn't really seem to work. I did see like some bugs for those logged in Compose Multiplatform's GitHub repo, but I'm not sure when those are going to be implemented. Yeah, so I can now switch over here and give like just a quick tour of the code base. This code is up online if anyone wants it. If you're not familiar with the structure of KMP library, I'll walk you through it here. This is Android Studio, first of all, so it's like the same IDE Android developers are used to using. And then there's the shared module where we have common main, Android main, and iOS main. So it makes it really easy to just put code, native code, where it needs to be, using a technique called expect actual. So in the common main, here's the API we were talking about, where Git grabs it from the web. It uses Ktor, which Ktor is really awesome. I believe they now even have support for desktop and web as well. Then there's the data model. And these are classes that I really just copy and pasted over from the Android repo, or the other KMP repo. And then this is, for me, this is the really exciting part here, is like, I was able to just take the theme and bring it over. For me, like I spend a lot, like talk about one of our team members always say, missing place is an important way to like get your project ready or get your app ready to be developed. And like the theme and the branding and the images are such an important part of that. And to have that in place cross-platform right off the bat is really awesome for me. Like that's very exciting. And so, yeah, this worked great, like typography, colors, shapes, all of it worked as expected. So like, as you would usually, you set the root composable as your theme and everything within it. So some of these, so this is what shows when that like profile or the author is clicked on. Camel image is a cross-platform remote image loading API. Android devs are probably used to using what's called Coil. And I know that they're working on cross-platform support soon. So soon we should be able to just copy and paste like our async image composable right over, and it'll work on iOS, which is really exciting. the outline.person, this is actually kind of limited compared to Android native. I don't really know why they didn't choose to like bring over all the icons, but there really is still quite a number of them. So here's the list view. Here's the lazy column I was talking about, item indexed. These are all supported as you would used to see. Like all the modifiers you're used to using are supported. And then when we look at our app structure, you'll see a lot of these remember and mutable states, which are critical for Compose development. You'll see launch effect, that all was working great. Instead of launch effect and going straight from the API, you can definitely use like a view model here, or just like flows collected as states. Like I didn't get to it, just it wasn't a tech constraint, it was more of a time constraint. But there's lots available in these composables, like doing it the way you would do in Android as well. So scaffolds supported, but I can't do, this is what I was talking about. Usually you could do like a nav host here, but like this class just doesn't exist. I'm not sure if they're gonna support it or not yet. So the last thing I want to show, which is kind of cool, is the build Gradle file. So if you're not used to Android dev, this is just like where you say what dependencies you're using and what third-party libraries you're bringing in, and also just do various project setup. So now there's this common main one, which that means Android, iOS, desktop, whatever, it all works. You can import your Compose libraries. Like this is so cool, like to have this down in this common main. I'm so excited. And like there's more parts of the Compose that I didn't bring in, but like supposedly like all of these are supported, Material 3, animations. The only thing that, excuse me, the only thing that didn't work for me was UI tooling. UI tooling I had to bring in under Android main. I think that has something to do with like the preview annotation. And also at first I got really worried because I didn't think previews worked in Compose Multiplatform. And so preview is like, while you're developing the UI, you can just quickly see what it looks like without running the app. And I had to add build features compose equals true and compose options compiler to match the compiler option that Android Studio was using for preview. This was really hard to find. And so if you're having trouble getting preview to work, definitely steal these. And when you can still do preview, but you do have to like define it in your Android main, but you can access your common main composables from the preview. So you just have to store them in Android main. If I go over to the split view, it'll load up the preview of this class. I'm running on a 2015 Mac, so it's a little slow. So yeah, as you can see, the previews still work. You can do preview in dark mode. All your preview functionality should work as expected. Yeah, here's a bunch of links and references that I used for researching during my research and also to make the code sample. Yeah, and I'm just really excited about this. Like, there hasn't really been a gradual adoption interoperability like solution to cross-platform, one that you can integrate into existing apps, and to have this being almost ready to use is just so exciting to me. I hope it inspired some of you too to look into it. Thank you so much, everyone, for time today as well. Is there any questions?
Hey, Mike, fantastic job. I'm super excited as well for Compose Multiplatform. I think that for all the Android folks, we all think that Compose is pretty awesome. And so bringing it across sounds great to me. Sounds great to us. I was really interested and said that you were able to actually get the Material 3 theme to work across iOS and Android. That was really surprising to me. I was wondering if you had also encountered any accessibility concerns with composable UI on iOS.
Yeah, so I didn't actually test the Material 3. I was just mentioning that you can pull it into common main. So I haven't actually seen that. I do imagine it works though, since it's all Kotlin. But yeah, like I mentioned earlier, the accessibility issues were the increased font size didn't work on the Compose, which was kind of a bummer. and voiceover, like iOS has like its own voiceover, and that wasn't explaining the UI or the images in the way that I expected. I don't know if I was just doing it wrong, but from my initial analysis, like I don't think those are supported yet.
Good job, Mike. This is really cool. Thanks for putting this on. It was really cool seeing all this. I've heard a lot about it, but actually being able to see you put this together was really cool. I guess I was going to ask too, did you get desktop up and running? And do you know if those same like accessibility, like I know iOS, I guess, is an alpha, so maybe that's understandable. Do you know if the desktop one is getting good feedback in terms of that?
That's a great question. I did test desktop on my Mac.
Yeah.
They have like 10 samples for Compose Multiplatform on the JetBrains repo, and that link is at the end of the slide deck. I'll send you
Okay,
that.
cool.
And it's super easy. You just load them up in Android Studio and hit play on your Mac
Yeah.
or your PC. But I did not test accessibility. I tested like the keyboard.
Yeah.
Like how does the keyboard work? How do emojis work? And it seemed to support sort of those native keyboard features, but I didn't test accessibility. That's really a question, and something that's super important.
Yeah.
So it's like, especially for enterprise level apps.
Yeah, and I guess like kind of related to that enterprise level, I know you showed, I think that the list of companies using KMP. So they change up the acronyms too much. KMP. Do you know if any of those are using Compose Multiplatform?
No, I don't think they are.
Okay.
I believe it's just like sort of what we're doing at Rhythm, where we're sharing the business logic, the network layer, the database. I mean, for something like Netflix, it's a no-brainer, right? It's like all internet activity. Yeah, so I don't think so yet. I'd be interested to see that though.
Well, I guess iOS is an alpha, so it'd probably be a desktop app maybe that's out there that's using it.
Good
But
question.
I don't know if any of those have desktop apps, but just curious, but very cool. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. Thanks a lot, Mike. Amazing talk. Really nicely done. Reminder to you all, we do these InRhythm Lightning Talks every Thursday at 5:15 p.m. Eastern Time. And next week, one of our lead software engineers, Bhavan Kuchibotla, is going to talk about one of the latest trends in the web technologies. I'm really looking forward to this talk. So please make sure you mark your calendar for next week. Thank you once again for joining. Have a wonderful evening, and I'll see you all next week.